Part 83. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 825. The previous special training tortured Wang Ling to the edge of collapse almost every day, which naturally aroused Wang Ling's resistance and reluctance. But now, the multiple control features were tested. This unexpected surprise made Wang Ling impatient. It's like an employee who is exhausted every day and finally receives an unexpected salary. When he sees the gratifying harvest, he will naturally have the motivation to continue. Haha, okay, and the Yuri clone was naturally happy to let Wang Ling complete the special training earlier, and had no reason to refuse. Ever since, Wang Ling's special training continued. My woo. In the real world, in the ward where Wang Ling was located, Xiao He stood up, his front paws on the side of Wang Ling's bed, and whispered with a sad look. On the seats next to it, all three people from the opposite dormitory were also staying here. Originally, they discussed that one person would bring Xiao He to visit every day, but the plan could not keep up with the change. The nurse and doctor on duty to take care of Wang Ling actually called them and said they were at Wang Ling's place. Every once in a while, they would tremble for a while, as if they were frightened by something scary, but they couldn't wake up, which was very abnormal. Worried, the three of them had no choice but to come to the hospital together the next day to check on Wang Ling's condition. When they witnessed Wang Ling's trembling state of fear with their own eyes, they became confused one by one. What's going on with him? How do I know? Don't talk about me, even the doctor doesn't know. How could a good person become like this? It's really strange. He has strong vital signs, but he just can't wake up. Why is he like this? The three people frowned and looked sad. They don't know the existence of the extra-dimensional system. No matter how rich their imagination is, they really can't imagine Wang Ling's current situation. After worrying about it for a while, one of them suddenly suggested, if you can't talk to the instructor, how about we call his roommates and ask them to take a leave of absence and come back to have a look? Hey, I think it works. Something happened to Wang Ling, they should come back and take a look. The three of them hit it off immediately, and it happened that one of them actually had the phone number of Wang Ling's roommate Wei Bowen. When he took it out and was about to call, Xiao He suddenly rushed up. Woof woof. Woof woof. Xiao He was still the same, barking and shaking his head vigorously, obviously rejecting the three of them's ideas. Still thinking as before, Xiao He didn't know Wang Ling's condition, but he didn't want the matter to be made public. Subconsciously, he knew that it would be of no benefit to Wang Ling if the matter was made public. Xiao He, we can't do this. We don't tell the instructor, we just tell his roommate. Isn't this okay? These three people also knew how smart Xiao He was and didn't find it strange. They even let others talk to Xiao He strangely. My woo. After hearing this, Xiao He's original bark gradually changed to a low sound. He was still shaking his head, but his eyes were a little more pleading. Okay, let's not call his roommate first. Don't be so anxious, okay, there was no other way. The three of them couldn't accept Xiao He's state and gave up instantly. Xiao He was then satisfied, barked, and returned to guard Wang Ling's bed. It was satisfied, but the three people were very melancholy. One of them looked at Xiao He and sighed, oh, it would be great if I had such a dog that could guard me like this. Pooh. But the other two people started to look down upon him. Please, what are you focusing on? Our problem now is not Xiao He, it's Wang Ling. What's the matter with him in this state? And he's not allowed to tell other people, are we in too much trouble? The most important issue is the hospitalization fee. The hospitalization fee is not cheap. How long can it last if the three of us share the living expenses equally? Hey, this is really a problem, it gives me a headache. There's nothing we can do. We can't just leave him alone, right? One day at a time, maybe he'll wake up one day. The discussion reached this point, although it was helpless, but it finally came to a result. Snort. But just after the discussion came out, Wang Ling, who was on the hospital bed, began to tremble again with a slight muffled sound, as if he was frightened by something. This look is really heart-wrenching. Why is Wang Ling trembling? It's not because of the special training of Yuri clones in the Red Alert world. His perverted mental pressure always forced Wang Ling into the deepest level of terrifying illusions, torturing Wang Ling's consciousness for a whole day, tossing Wang Ling to the point of almost collapse before he stopped. And this torture, reflected in the real world, showed Wang Ling's trembling performance. Isn't the current tremor just because Wang Ling finished his experiment in the Red Alert world and started special training again? Wang Lingshang was a little reluctant to receive special training a few days ago, but starting today, he took the initiative to become a masochist, urging the Yuri clone to undergo special training to enhance his mental strength. The Yuri clone also went to great lengths to release powerful mental pressure on Wang Ling every day. After several days passed, Wang Ling's mental power had indeed made great progress. However, Wang Ling is still afraid of the deep-seated illusion that normal people should have overcome long ago, as if it is Wang Ling's life gate, which is difficult to overcome. For this reason, after some doubts, the Yuri clone gradually looked away and even got used to it. However, not long after he got used to it, he discovered another phenomenon that made him even more surprised. Beneath Wang Ling's deep illusion, there is actually a secondary terrifying illusion, even more hidden than this dark space. In that illusion, Wang Ling was in the real world, but around him there were a large number of modern infantry, armed with a large number of modern weapons. There were even tanks and armored vehicles around him, and even various types of armed helicopters were dispatched, just to encircle and suppress Wang Ling. Ling Yiren. It stands to reason that with Wang Ling's combat power, he can easily deal with these surrounding troops, but in fact, in the secondary illusion, Wang Ling, instead of taking action to fight back, was very panicked, and despite the firepower, he almost ran away in a panic. After escaping from the encirclement at the cost of serious injuries, Wang Ling quickly blended into the ordinary crowd. However, after all, he stood out from the crowd and was so conspicuous that the crowd around him actually rejected him. Wherever he passed, they all made way for an open space to isolate him. Wang Ling had no choice but to continue fleeing, escaping from the city into the towns, and then from the towns into the villages. He thought he had escaped the encirclement and suppression by the armed forces, but unexpectedly, not long after he stopped, there were a large number of helicopters. Come forward and unleash the explosive artillery and rockets on it. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 826. Brushing, brushing, brushing. Boom. Boom boom boom. These artillery pieces and rockets bombarded Wang Linglei without mercy at all, as if he had been treated as some kind of heinous sinner and directly sentenced to death. Depend on. Of course, Wang Ling, who was in the secondary illusion, would not just surrender. While the artillery and rockets were flying, he jumped exaggeratedly into the distance. But when he jumped, the shock wave of the violent explosion still affected part of him. He spit out a mouthful of blood in the air and fell to the ground forcefully. However, at this time, Wang Ling didn't care about his injuries at all. As soon as he landed firmly, he slapped the ground and immediately ran out. Wang Ling's escape speed was fast, but no matter how fast he was, how could he be faster than a helicopter? As a result, he was caught up by the helicopter not long after he ran away, and the high-impact rocket blew Wang Ling over again. But Wang Ling still didn't compromise. He even learned better after suffering a big loss. He rushed directly into the houses, shuttled quickly between the houses, broke one wall, and immediately crashed into the back of the other wall. Those helicopters were indeed concerned about people's houses. They seemed to be afraid of accidental damage and did not fire indiscriminately. However, they always stared at Wang Ling from the air, biting hard and unable to get rid of him. As a result, after Wang Ling passed the last house, he took the risk and ran towards the woods behind the village. During this period, Wang Ling was naturally attacked by a lot of artillery fire, even mixed with Gatling machine gun fire, causing Wang Ling to suffer more injuries. However, despite his injuries, Wang Ling managed to break into the woods. With the help of the cover of the lush trees, he quickly got rid of the helicopter group, and finally jumped into the stream in the woods and went upstream. After this saucy maneuver, Wang Ling did successfully get rid of those helicopters, but his injuries became more and more serious. After landing on the shore, he staggered away and was finally rescued by a simple farmer and helped him into his home. However, just when Wang Ling, who was seriously injured, was about to sit down and rest, the farmer suddenly stabbed the sharp knife into his waist, and the white knife went in and the red knife came out. This sudden attack really shocked Wang Ling, and he fell to the ground with a look of disbelief on his face. But the farmer, at this time, changed his previous simplicity and opened the door curtain, revealing the aborigines who had been killed by him. Then he asked with a sinister face, "Hand over the things, I can still give them to you. What a pleasure to you. Get out of here, you beast." However, Wang Ling in the secondary illusion was also extremely stubborn. Even though his life was at risk, he still kept speaking. This angered the killer. "No? Haha, you still dare to attack me? I will let you do it." As he spoke, the second knife was already stabbed at him. Buzz. Before the knife hit Wang Ling, Yuri's clone had suddenly cut off its mental pressure, and the original secondary illusion suddenly blurred and finally dissipated. However, Wang Ling, who returned from the secondary illusion, seemed to be completely stunned. He had even forgotten to take a deep breath to mediate, and he lay on the ground in a daze. What's this? This time, not only Wang Ling, but also Yuri's clone was frightened. For the first time since the special training, Wang Ling shed a cold sweat after the end, and even panted slightly. I don't know if it was because of tiredness or shocked. He didn't care about Wang Ling's current state, and directly threw out the questions in his heart. Why is there a secondary illusion hidden in your deepest terror? What is going on in that illusion? What world are you in? Why are the buildings around you so strange, and the pedestrians dressed so strangely? And why do those armies surround you? What weapons do they use, and why are they different from the ones we have here? You obviously have weapons that can easily crush them. Why didn't you take action? What did that person ask you to hand over in the end? Did you take anything from them? What is going on in this illusion? As a character in the world of Red Alert, but he saw the real world from Wang Ling's secondary illusion. Yuri's clone was really messy, and he couldn't understand what was going on. It's like people in the two-dimensional world cannot understand the three-dimensional world, and we in the three-dimensional world know almost nothing about the fourth-dimensional world. As a player in the game world, even if you are as powerful as Yuri, you don't know that you are just a high-level program and know nothing about the real world. However, he asked so many questions in one breath. How would Wang Ling answer him? Not to mention that after being controlled, Wang Ling had no consciousness of returning in his mind, let alone the possibility of telling things in the real world. Wang Ling's current state alone was really terrible. In the past, even if the special training was harsh and lasted for one day, at least Wang Ling would still be conscious. But now, he seemed to have collapsed. His eyes were a little blurry and he couldn't even take a deep breath. Facing the Yuri clone, a lot of questions were raised, but they were ignored. Oops, you can't be too impatient and let him collapse, right? After a while, Wang Ling didn't see any movement. Yuri's clone became worried, and quickly approached Wang Ling, opened his eyelids, and used psychic abilities were tested. Okay. After the detection, Yuri's clone heaved a sigh of relief. Although Wang Ling was in a bad state, he did not completely collapse. He maintained the last trace of clarity. Now he is just immersed in the fear of that hallucination, returning to it for a long time. However, God seems to be confused. Since Wang Ling was fine, Yuri's clone didn't ask any more questions. It was just noon now, but Wang Ling's condition obviously meant that he could no longer continue the special training and had to terminate it early. He didn't go to take care of Wang Ling. After standing up, he turned away and walked out of the room very calmly. In the process of walking out, Yuri's clone was also thinking about what was going on in that strange world, and why was Wang Ling so scared. This series of questions linger in my mind, difficult to know and difficult to solve. After the Yuri clone left, Wang Ling still remained in that confused state. It lasted for a long time before he gradually recovered from the fear. Ah! It hurts. He sat up slowly, but the severe pain in his mind made him even more tormented. He held his head and couldn't help but let out a painful scream. After the scream, Wang Ling forcefully adapted to the pain, gritted his teeth, and recalled the fear in the secondary illusion. Even he himself began to wonder, that place seems to be my original world. But I am here. What are you afraid of? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 827. Wang Ling's current situation is really confusing. As a player in the real world, in the end, he was mind-controlled by people in the Red Alert world. In this situation, Wang Ling knew that he had a special identity and remembered the existence of the real world, but in his heart he already regarded himself as a person from the Red Alert world, and his feelings for the real world gradually became blurred. For example, now, in the secondary illusion, Wang Ling clearly recognized the real world, but he felt confused about what happened in the real world, and he didn't even know why he had such a strong sense of fear. It's wired. Holding his head, he thought hard for a long time, but he still couldn't figure it out. Wang Ling simply didn't want to worry about it. His current state was too bad to care too much. He stood up shakily and walked out of the room step by step. After such harsh special training, Wang Ling's body was severely exhausted, but he had no extra energy to eat. He walked into his room with slow steps, fell down, and closed his eyes. The constant tingling sensation in his head also interfered with Wang Ling's nerves. From time to time, he would hear intermittent muffled sounds, making it impossible to sleep at all. Suffering from such torture, no one knows how long it took. After the pain subsided slightly, Wang Ling finally fell asleep. I was so exhausted that I lost all sense of time when I slept. There was no sign of waking up all afternoon. I ignored dinner and slept all night. I didn't wake up until the next morning. After resting for such a long time, Wang Ling's fatigue from yesterday had been completely eliminated. After opening his eyes, the pain in his head had disappeared. However, what replaced it was an extremely itchy swelling sensation, as if there was a strange energy waiting to be erupted. Ah! This feeling was very torturous. Wang Ling did not endure it for long. With a cry, he spread this strange energy to his heart's content. Buzz. The energy that appeared in his mind was naturally the spiritual energy generated after special training. As a result, Wang Ling spread out uncontrollably and immediately formed a strong spiritual shockwave that shattered the room in an instant. All the furnishings in it. And this room could not stop the spread of Wang Ling's spiritual energy. A very broad spiritual power spread out from the periphery of the shockwave, forming a spiritual pressure that spread and covered the surrounding bases almost instantly. Periphery. Any infantryman who comes into contact with this mental coercion will feel a sudden feeling in their heart, and a sense of panic will arise spontaneously. Even some infantrymen who are relatively weak in bearing ability are already trembling. I think back then, when Wang Ling had just gained the mental pressure skill, he had used it against Sun Dehu and others, but it had almost no effect. But now, even Yuri's new recruits, even the wild orcs and the psychic troops, have varying degrees of fear, which shows how strong his spiritual power has grown. Of course, the Yuri clone in the palace was also exposed to this mental pressure. His mental power was so powerful that it was naturally not affected. However, when exposed to Wang Ling's mental pressure, he also closed his eyes and felt it for himself. After a while, he opened his eyes, smiled, and said to himself, "It is already strong enough to exert pressure on ordinary infantry. Not bad. But why is this pressure range so great? Big. Yes, ordinary psychic troops, and even his Yuri clone, have a limit distance when exercising mind control. Beyond this distance, they cannot perform it. The range of mental pressure is larger than that of mind control, but it is also very limited. There is always a limit distance. However, the mental pressure released by Wang Ling this time has already exceeded this limit distance. It's still expanding." When he was questioning, the Yuri clone stood up in shock, because Wang Ling's pressure range, which had already exceeded the limit, continued to expand at this moment, until it enveloped the 3 major Yuri bases. Most of the area stopped expanding. And now this range, just the radius distance, is already twice as wide as his Yuri clone. Who observing this vast range of pressure, even with the mentality of Yuri's clone, he couldn't help but breathe heavily, and seemed to be extremely excited. Wang Ling, what can you do? How many surprises can you give me?" Ah! Of course, Wang Ling didn't know how Yuri's clone was shocked. He didn't even know what he had done. He was just venting his thoughts. After this shouting lasted for a long time, the swelling feeling in his head was vented, and after he felt comfortable, Wang Ling stopped. The terrifying pressure that permeated most of the 3 Yuri bases also disappeared, and those who were originally exposed to the threat disappeared. The suppressed and panicked infantrymen finally relaxed, and each one gasped in fear. Gilug. Of course Wang Ling didn't know that just venting had such an impact on the Ruishan branch. After venting, his stomach started to protest unsatisfactorily. After all, he didn't eat lunch or dinner yesterday, and he endured that kind of hellish torture. Wang Ling was really hungry now. He didn't pay attention to the damaged things in the room. He just casually ordered the guards to clean up, and then he slipped out of the palace and went to have breakfast. After yesterday's hellish torture and such a long rest, Wang Ling now felt quite refreshed. The breakfast that originally seemed to him to be very boring now tasted particularly delicious. Not long after the meal, when Wang Ling was strolling around, the special training order for Yuri's clone was finally issued. Wang Ling walked into the training room out of habit, and Yuri's clone was already waiting inside. After Wang Ling was in place, the Yuri clone did not start special training immediately. Instead, he asked, "Wang Ling, how do you feel now?" Wang Ling answered truthfully, "Yesterday's special training tortured me so hard that I felt like I was about to die. I felt several times more uncomfortable than usual. But the effect is also more obvious. I can feel now that my mental strength is much fuller than yesterday." Yuri's clone nodded slowly, "That's great. Since the effect is stronger, we will use this intensity of pressure for special training in the future. Can you bear it?" "Hush, seriously, it's hard to bear. But since the effect is obvious, let's go ahead. I will grit my teeth and persevere no matter what." There is no shortcut on the road to becoming stronger. Wang Ling was open-minded. The Yuri clone was obviously very satisfied with his attitude, but before the training started, he thought of yesterday's secondary illusion, but couldn't help but ask, "Yesterday's illusion doesn't seem to be from our world, right? What's going on? Why are you so scared?" "It's indeed not from this world, because that's the world I originally lived in. Different dimension red alert world. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 828. This answer was beyond the expectations of Yuri's clone. His heart skipped a beat. After a while, he calmed down and asked, "What's going on? You are not originally from this world, then how did you come here?" Time travel. Wang Ling's player identity is the most unique existence in this entire world, and of course it is also Wang Ling's biggest secret in both worlds. Now that he is willing to reveal this information, it is because of helplessness. Who made the illusion actually appear in that life, and let the Yuri clone see it? However, I'm sorry if I try to get more information out of him. When exposed to the series of sensitive questions, Wang Ling couldn't help but smile playfully and replied, "Sir, if you shouldn't ask, don't ask casually. If you dig into this matter, it will not do you or me any good. As for why I came to this world, and why I am so afraid of what I will encounter in that world, to be honest, I can't remember it clearly. Maybe it's because I am controlled by your mind, and that part of my emotions has been suppressed. If you dare to say such rude words to the Yuri clone, it is estimated that there will be no other person in the entire Mind Empire except Wang Ling." After hearing this, Yuri's clone did feel a little unhappy, but he didn't show it. He just pondered for a while and then asked, "Are the people in that world as unique in their mental makeup as you are?" This time it was Wang Ling's turn to be in trouble. "How do I know? I'm different from you. I can't detect other people's mental structures. If you ask me, who should I ask? Besides, I'm very vague about things in that world now, I can't go back." The Yuri clone frowned. In his opinion, if the people in Wang Ling's world have the same unique mental structure as Wang Ling, then no matter what he says, Wang Ling must go back, bring more people, and train them to form a unique army of psychic troops. Who can stop it? However, Wang Ling's answer directly shattered his fantasy. "Hey, I called you sir, and you really acted like a sir? Hurry up and give me special training, old man, stop asking questions, I don't know that." Just as Yuri's clone was struggling with these matters, Wang Ling became impatient and started urging him with curses. Yuri's clone was choked by this blow, and his face suddenly turned red and his neck was thick, and he glared at Wang Ling fiercely. However, after all, he is the king of the Mind Empire, and the Yuri clone's mentality is quite good. After warning with his eyes, he said nothing more, and then released the same mental pressure as yesterday. Snort. When he came into contact with this pressure, Wang Ling immediately felt a buzzing in his head, and quickly mobilized his mental strength to resist it. Yesterday, this level of mental pressure was enough to force Wang Ling into a secondary illusion. But precisely because of that horrific torture, Wang Ling's mental strength also made a leap forward by leaps and bounds. Today, when exposed to the same pressure again, not even an ordinary illusion appeared. It just made Wang Ling miserable. This change was noticed by the Yuri clone. While surprised, it couldn't help laughing. At the same time, it also increased the intensity of its mental pressure. Finally, not long after, Wang Ling was forced into the deepest place. The illusion of dark space at different levels, and not long after, he successfully entered the realm of that fantasy again. In this illusion, it was still like yesterday. Wang Ling was almost ostracized by the entire world in the real world. Not only did the local troops pursue him, but even some mysterious organizations surfaced one after another, using various methods to intimidate and lure him. He handed over that thing, but Wang Ling, in fear, avoided them all one by one, and even tried his best to escape overseas. However, the environment overseas is much worse than at home. More mysterious organizations are pursuing them one after another, and even troops from various countries are wanted around the world. Wang Ling seems to have become the most wanted criminal in the world. No matter where he is, they are always faced with endless pursuit. Fear, exhaustion, and despair, these three emotions were intertwined in Wang Ling's heart, oppressing his mental strength almost all the time, forcing him into a state of collapse several times, but he gritted his teeth every time. He forced himself through it. This continued for half a day. When Wang Ling was about to reach his limit, the extreme training finally ended, and the Yuri clone withdrew the powerful mental pressure. However, today he no longer had cold sweats, nor did he even feel any fatigue. He glanced at Wang Ling, who was nearly paralyzed, and walked out of the room expressionlessly. As for Wang Ling, just like yesterday, he stayed alone in the room for a long time before gradually regaining consciousness, tremblingly returning to the room, and resting until the next day. This almost extreme hell-like special training started from then on and gradually became Wang Ling's daily life. Every day in that fantasy world, he would be hunted by the whole world, accompanied by despair and fear every day, as if he was living in hell. The effect of such extreme hell training is naturally very significant. After continuing for a period of time, Wang Ling's mental strength increased by leaps and bounds, almost catching up with the general level of the Soul Empire, and catching up with Yuri. X. After being wanted by the whole world in the secondary illusion for so long, Wang Ling gradually adapted to it, and he became more and more comfortable in evading pursuit in the secondary illusion. He was even able to distinguish some evil organizations and annihilate them. As a result, the time that Wang Ling was able to persist in that illusion became longer and longer, gradually increasing from half a day to a full day. However, the stronger his mental power, the longer and more difficult the special training becomes, releasing high-intensity mental pressure from morning to night. After the end, even Yuri's clone felt a little tired. However, this obviously did not reach the limit of Yuri's clone, and the special training continued. Naturally, the secondary illusion is not the real world, but the fear that exists deep in Wang Ling's heart, which has been amplified into an ideological illusion. However, after gradually getting used to it during the special training, this fear gradually faded away, and the secondary illusion also disappeared. At this point, Wang Ling's mental power has reached the level of Yuri. However, the Yuri clones and even Wang Ling himself were striving for excellence and were still undergoing special training for a period of time. It's just that this special training can no longer force Wang Ling into that deep illusion. He just resists under the high-intensity mental pressure every day to force his improvement. However, the effect of this special training method was not very great, and it lasted for a short time, until Wang Ling got tired of it, and this special training finally officially came to an end. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 829. This devilish special training lasted for nearly a month and finally ended. In this month, Wang Ling has forgotten how many times he was on the verge of collapse, but he always gritted his teeth and persevered. The result of persistence made Wang Ling quite satisfied. Now his spiritual power was second only to Yuri, the clones, and a few powerful generals in the entire Soul Empire. With such a strong mental power, Wang Ling realized how fragile his mental power was before the special training. With his current mental strength, he could even blast himself instantly through mental shock waves. After gaining such a strong spiritual power, Wang Ling's personal temperament also underwent a transformation from the inside out. On the surface, he seemed to be more arrogant and confident, but because of his blackening, his whole person also appeared sharper, as if it's like being able to kill someone with a cold gaze. Sensing Wang Ling's drastic change, Yuri's clone nodded with great satisfaction. Naturally, after the end, a test is also needed to understand Wang Ling's current use of mental power. This test was actually similar to the last time. Some villagers, infantry, and tanks were mobilized for Wang Ling to try one after another. However, in the last experiment, there were no other bystanders except Yuri's clone, but this time, there were many infantrymen watching, and even Yuri of spiritual strength. During the last test, Wang Ling's mental power was far less powerful than it is now. Although it showed the specificity of multiple controls, it was still too limited after all. But this time, Wang Ling's mental power has undergone a qualitative change. To be honest, the Yuri clone and even several generals are quite looking forward to what the test results will be. As a result, Wang Ling did not disappoint them. On the way to the experimental subject, but before they arrived at the experimental location, Wang Ling suddenly cast 3 mental power connections from a long distance away, and controlled the subjects one after another. 3 villagers, this distance is almost twice the maximum control distance of Yuri's clone. Even though he already knew a lot about Wang Ling's special abilities, when he saw this scene, the Yuri clone couldn't help but frown. The shock in his heart lasted for a while, and then he laughed heartily. The expressions of the generals were even more shocked and full of disbelief. They looked at Wang Ling as if they were looking at a monster. The other infantrymen were also dumbfounded, especially the ordinary psychic troops. Who the hell is this person? How come the control distance is so far? And he can control 3 people with 1 person at one go. Snort. However, while the entire audience was shocked, there was one person who was very unhappy, such as Yuri X, since Yuri's clone showed that he wanted Wang Ling to become a hero-level unit of the Soul Empire, and could even replace him. Yuri, his mental strength and hostile attitude instantly reached its peak. Of course, in front of the Yuri clone, Yuri noticed. Wang Ling, who was in the experiment, had no intention of taking more control. He controlled the 3 villagers and came to the experimental point with other infantry and tanks. After making a series of actions, he interrupted the control and turned to aim. Yuri's new recruit cast 3 mental power lines in succession. When controlling the villagers, it was easy to control 3 people in a row. But when it fell to the infantry, the first 2 were successfully controlled. However, when the third was controlled, the connection began to become unstable again, and the result was only controlled. After a few breaths, he forcibly interrupted. Cut. This result also made Wang Ling quite dissatisfied, but his experiment was not interrupted. After releasing the control, he faced several tanks and cast mental power lines one after another. As a result, the first 2 tanks were successfully controlled, but when the third mental connection came into contact with the third gust tank, it was immediately bounced away. Damn it, Wang Ling was also quite unhappy after experiencing this kind of encounter again. Indeed, his current mental strength has almost qualitatively changed compared to the last test, but multiple controls are not that easy. Every time he controls an additional enemy unit, the difficulty will increase several times. At least now, firmly controlling 2 enemy units can already play a big role on the battlefield. What's more, Wang Ling's ultimate control distance is far beyond that of ordinary psychic troops. But he was still a little dissatisfied. If he wanted to control another unit, it would be extremely difficult. Pa! 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 Just when Wang Ling was upset, Yuri's clone clapped his hands every now and then. But before other infantrymen could follow suit, he stopped directly and concluded, "Not bad, not bad. Double the control distance, double the amount of control, this result is beyond my expectation. But I feel that now your mental strength has not reached the peak state that can be developed. You only need to increase it by 1 level, and the control units can continue to increase. If you continue with the old-fashioned special training, it will be difficult to develop quickly. Now the only way is to strengthen it. Transformation can help you break this bottleneck and step into a higher realm." Intensified transformation. When the word was mentioned, Wang Ling didn't seem to be interested in it. He didn't comment. After calming down, he said, "Hey, sir, don't rush to a conclusion yet. The experiment can still be done, it's not over yet. I also want to try the shock wave. Who is here willing to participate in the test?" "Huh. I do not want it. Whoever doesn't want to live will go, but I won't go anyway." If you don't go, you won't go, or you'll be killed. Wang Ling's words really startled the surrounding infantry, and they even stepped back. It's not like they have never seen the shockwaves of the psychic troops. The infantry can't bear it at all. If they are exposed to that range, they will explode and die. But looking at it now, Wang Ling's mental power is much stronger than that of ordinary psychic troops. Participating in his shockwave experiment is simply a matter of death. Tch, boring. Seeing the cowardly behavior of these infantrymen, Wang Ling became bored. Ha ha ha, but the Yuri clone laughed very happily. Let's skip the test of the shockwave. It is too lethal. Let's use it and experiment it on the Allies or coalition forces on the battlefield in the future. It seems that this is the only way. Wang Ling shrugged his shoulders, seeming to be a little reluctant. After stopping Wang Ling, Yuri's clone turned around and said, "Now, let's go to the palace. Before the strengthening and transformation, there is one more important thing. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 830. Yes, leader. A group of infantrymen, including several generals and Yuri X, all responded and followed closely behind the Yuri clone. Wang Ling was unmoved. He kept looking at the last gust tank that bounced off his mental connection, feeling a little unhappy. After a while, he let out a spit and turned around to follow the team. The palace was usually deserted. At best, there were only Yuri clones, a few generals, Yuri, but now, with Yuri's clone taking the lead, dozens of people entered the room at once, making it more lively than usual. A group of infantrymen consciously stopped at the periphery of the hall and did not go deep. Only the Yuri clone, a few generals, Yuri X, and Wang Ling walked to the front and watched the Yuri clone sitting on the throne. After waiting for him to sit firmly, Wang Ling asked impatiently, "Sir, what else can I do? Stop being pretentious and tell me quickly. You have to show some respect to the leader. In the Empire of the Soul, the leader is the absolute king. When facing the leader, you must not be arrogant. Wang Ling, no matter how strong you are, you must abide by the rules." The generals and Yuri, however, it was the first time for the other infantrymen who followed them to hear Wang Ling talking to Yuri's clone like this. The rude attitude almost instantly angered this group of people, and they began to criticize one after another. Shut the hell up. However, how could Wang Ling care about this? He turned around and glared at them fiercely, and threatened, "Are you annoyed that all of them are like flies? If you dare to be nagging again, I will kill you. You." Ha ha ha. A group of infantrymen were extremely angry, and some of them were about to retaliate, but the Yuri clone suddenly burst into laughter, interrupting them. After hearing the leader's voice, no matter how dissatisfied the group of infantrymen were with Wang Ling, they could only shut their mouths obediently and show a very humble and respectful look. After the Yuri clone had laughed enough, he explained, Wang Ling, do you see it? Your attitude makes even the soldiers at the bottom dissatisfied with you." Tch, Wang Ling didn't care, folding his arms, looking cool. "So what? You don't have that strength, you have a bad temper, don't you feel embarrassed? Arrogant. Just a prisoner, how can he be so arrogant? Who do you think you are? Just a prisoner. If the leader hadn't taken care of you, do you think you could have survived until now?" A group of angry infantrymen were stabbed again, and the situation exploded in an instant, and they began to accuse again. Wang Ling's face darkened, and he just moved his fingers, planning to strike, but at this moment, Yuri's clone interrupted again, "Tisk, tisk. Wang Ling, what I'm going to say next has nothing to do with your attitude." Wang Ling then gave up the idea of taking action and asked, What does it have to do with me? Yuri's clone replied, I have told you before that not everyone is qualified and able to receive the enhanced transformation potion. And your current status is that you are still a prisoner after all, and you have an arrogant attitude. You have also seen the result. Many soldiers are very dissatisfied with you and want to challenge you. Challenge? Haha, that's interesting. Is it a one-on-one challenge or a group fight? Upon hearing this word, Wang Ling perked up. But the Yuri clone shook his head, with a mysterious look. In terms of direct combat effectiveness, no one is your opponent. If you want to challenge, then do it in a special way. In what way? Life and death drill. Huh? What do you mean? I will select 50 infantrymen who are dissatisfied with you and parachute with you into the mountains and forests in the north to fight with each other. But Wang Ling, after all, this is an exercise for my soul empire, so you are not allowed to use the abilities of other arms, only can use the combat method of the psychic army. In addition, I will also send 40 wild orcs and 20 virus snipers to surround the mountain forest and advance a certain distance every half hour. Kill all the infantry until the last one is left. As the winner, he will undergo enhanced transformation. Yuri's clone leisurely stated the exercise rules he had formulated. Listening to these rules, Wang Ling always felt a little familiar, much like a game in the real world, but what kind of game it was, Wang Ling in this state couldn't remember clearly. Since I didn't remember it, I didn't bother to think about it anymore. I shook my head and smiled sarcastically, why bother? What, are you scared? Can he not be afraid? He is just a prisoner. He is not a member of my soul empire at all. He completely relies on the combat effectiveness of the coalition and allied forces. If he uses the fighting method of the soul army, how can he be our opponent? It's okay to be afraid, you must participate in the drill. The other infantrymen who didn't know what was going on also started mocking them. When Wang Ling saw that they had misunderstood, he stopped playing riddles and straight away said, Hey, don't get me wrong. What I mean is, why are you seeking death like this? Are you alive? Okay. Hateful. Arrogant. You can't be so arrogant with the coalition's troops. You should teach him a lesson. A group of infantrymen exploded again, but Wang Ling did not let them go this time. He turned around and said provocatively, in my opinion, there is no need to drill anymore. It is a waste of time. Whoever wants to challenge, just stand up. I don't care how many there are, as long as I can survive one round of my mental power shockwave, I will automatically withdraw from the Mind Empire. What do you think? This guy. Damn, he's so annoying. Come on. Fight with him. We also have a lot of psychic troops here, he will definitely not be able to do it. After being provoked to this point, a group of infantrymen could no longer stand and encouraged each other, as if they were about to start the challenge in advance. After hearing this, Yuri X also raised his eyebrows, and a flash of excitement flashed in his heart. To be honest, Wang Ling's provocation was unbearable for other infantrymen, but it was enough for Yuri X. Wang Ling's spiritual power did surpass Yuri X, but it was only limited. It was impossible to kill him through shock waves. According to Wang Ling, as long as he survives his shockwave, Wang Ling will withdraw from the Soul Empire. The strongest hero-level unit will become a joke. Thinking of this, Yuri. Absurd. But at this time, Yuri's clone interrupted again, Wang Ling, there is no need to discuss this matter. It must be done according to the rules I set. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 831. To be honest, the current Yuri clone is quite frustrated. He thought about this exercise rule for a long time before coming up with it. He is very much looking forward to what Wang Ling can do under that situation. However, this guy didn't take the exercise seriously and directly provoked a group of infantrymen. Where did he put his leader's face? Cut. However, the one who responded fastest to the mandatory orders from Yuri's clone was not Wang Ling, but Yuri X. He was just thinking about whether to take this opportunity to expel Wang Ling and retain his title of hero, but the leader killed him directly. Of course he was unhappy. However, Wang Ling was the protagonist in the scene, and no one paid attention to his emotional changes. Wang Ling's reaction was half a beat too slow. He tilted his head and said impatiently, "Why are you so ignorant, old man? Who asked you to train me for so long? For your sake, just practice it. Speaking of which, this drill is quite interesting, you can try it." After saying that, he even turned around to look at the dissatisfied infantryman and mocked, "You are lucky, you can live a little longer. Hateful. We'll see, just wait for death." A group of infantrymen were angry, and Yuri's clone then said, "Okay, Wang Ling, you go back and rest first. The exercise will not start until tomorrow. During this time, I will select 50 infantrymen. Those who participate in the exercise, do a good job, be mentally prepared." Wang Ling waved his hand, looking unconcerned, "There's nothing to prepare, it's just a formality." After saying that, the guy walked away without looking back. After he left, a member of the psychic army said angrily, "Chief, Wang Ling is just a prisoner. Why should he enjoy such treatment?" There was another wild orc who shouted carelessly, "That's right. Chief, look at him like that, he really deserves a beating. I couldn't help but want to beat him several times." Some Yuri recruits also complained, "The key is his attitude towards you, the leader, and he doesn't respect you at all, making it difficult to convince the public." On the contrary, those virus snipers were very open-minded and no one complained. They just watched the show with a playful attitude. The Yuri clone was not surprised. Instead, he smiled and said, "Aren't you unhappy with him? Then just kill him in tomorrow's exercise. But the premise is that you must have this ability. Don't do it, I could kill Wang Ling, but I was killed by him instead." A group of infantrymen instantly misfired. Wang Ling was indeed arrogant, but his fighting power was here after all. This group of people dared to make noises, but few dared to really let go and fight Wang Ling. Sensing the subtle psychological changes in this group of infantry, Yuri's clone immediately said with disdain, "Why, all of them are just talking words. Before the exercise starts tomorrow, if there are not even 50 people, Wang Ling will win without a fight. Is this what you want to see?" Of course, no one wants that, but it is really difficult to really fight Wang Ling to the death. "Chief, I want to be the first to sign up." After a period of silence, a member of the psychic army finally signed up to participate. This psychic trooper has a certain fate with Wang Ling. He was the one who controlled the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle that brought Wang Ling and Yuri X to the Russian branch. At that time, he almost had a big conflict with Wang Ling. If the Yuri clone had not arrived in time, he might have died at the gunpoint of Wang Ling. Now, the anti-aircraft tracked vehicle had already been destroyed on the battlefield, and there was no one to control. This psychic trooper was relaxed. He couldn't stand Wang Ling anyway, so he might as well take this opportunity to give Wang Ling a try. Yuri's clone was a little surprised and asked, "Camus, aren't you afraid of being killed by Wang Ling?" The member of the psychic force known as Camus replied categorically, "Not afraid. Moreover, leader, it is not necessarily Wang Ling who can win. Wang Ling Qiang is strong in the combat effectiveness of his arms, but the exercise restricted his arms and he could only use his mind. With the way the troops attack, are we veterans still afraid of him?" "Haha, okay, your courage is commendable, count you in," Yuri's clone smiled. "Chief, I'll sign up too. I'm coming too." Camus' explanation also dispelled the concerns of other infantrymen to a certain extent. With him as a leader, other infantrymen also plucked up the courage to come forward to sign up. Among them were Yuri recruits, wild orcs, and many others. There are few psychic force members, but no virus snipers. In this way, the preparations for the exercise were finally carried out smoothly. Yuri's clone revealed the news, and soon many infantrymen signed up to participate, and it didn't take long for 50 places to participate. Afterwards, it was time to prepare transport planes. The Empire of Mind occupies many technological airports, and there is also one outside the Russian branch. With the help of transport planes, it is very convenient to transport troops. Then he set about arranging the exercise location, divided a certain area, and projected it on a special electronic map. He also selected 40 wild orcs and 20 virus snipers, designated the location, and the specific methods at that time. Everything was arranged in an orderly manner, but Wang Ling didn't take it to heart at all. Lying on the bed in the room, Wang Ling was thinking about how to further improve his mental strength so that he could have one more person. Controlled enemy units. Is there no other way besides strengthening and transforming? And obviously no one can answer this question. Time passed quickly, and in a blink of an eye, it was time for the exercise on the second day. Wang Ling and the other 50 infantrymen who were selected together boarded the transport plane, took off smoothly, and gradually flew to the exercise location. During this period, the plane was always quiet. Wang Ling did not provoke them, but just leaned on the seat and closed his eyes to rest. The others did not speak, but these 50 people were all communicating with their eyes, and when they looked at Wang Ling, their eyes were filled with undisguised hostility and murderous intent. However, Wang Ling didn't care. With his eyes closed, he was already in the sky above the training forest. After being notified by the staff, a total of 50 people were pushed down in an orderly manner and arrived at the training forest via parachute. After landing, Wang Ling took off his parachute and stretched. He can also observe the electronic map here, and can also check the remaining number of people in the exercise. However, you cannot view the location of other people like a normal electronic map. Wang Ling didn't care about this. The area for training in the forest was too big. Wang Ling was too lazy to look for other people one by one, so he simply followed the electronic map and walked to the center. Anyway, as time goes by, the safe area shrinks, and other people will come here sooner or later. However, when Wang Ling came to the hilltop in the center, there was already a person waiting there. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 832. Seeing the cool-looking figure standing with his hands behind his back, Wang Ling couldn't help but wonder, who are you? Everyone else is avoiding me. I didn't meet anyone along the way. Why did you run here? Hearing Wang Ling's voice, this figure turned around gracefully. Looking at his appearance, couldn't he become you? They guessed it right. You will come right to the center and wait. Wang Ling, do you still remember me? Camus asked with a confident look, still holding his hands behind his back. However, Wang Ling didn't show any respect at all, and said a little impatiently, have you ever thought about clubbing? How could I remember you? Who are you? Camus was startled. His originally cool figure suddenly stumbled, looking very funny. After barely stabilizing himself, Camus shouted angrily, I am Camus. The anti-aircraft crawler vehicle you first came to Russian branch with is my prisoner. Oh, when you say that, I have an impression. Is he the one who almost died at my gunpoint and was persuaded by the old man to stop him? Wang Ling finally recalled it. However, he didn't pick up any of the pots. When he mentioned that embarrassing incident, Camus suddenly became so angry that his face turned red and his neck thickened. But before he could scold him, Wang Ling continued, Camus, everyone else is grouping together, Why did you come to me alone? Do you want to form an alliance with me? I. Save it for yourself. With your fighting ability, if you don't hold me back, I'll be in trouble. If you want to live a little longer, you'd better get out of here while I'm still in a good mood. Camus wanted to refute or even sarcastically, but Wang Ling spoke too quickly and blocked him. Instead he mocked him. You are arrogant. Finally waiting for Wang Ling to shut up, Camus quickly seized the opportunity and shouted, I'm here to challenge you, Wang Ling. You still want me to join an alliance with you, are you worthy? You can't use the abilities of other arms. What do you think, can you kill me? Even if I can't kill you, I can hold you back until others come, and that's when you die. I see. Wang Ling finally realized, and kept teasing Camus with a playful attitude. Now that he had revealed the truth, Wang Ling put away his previous cynical attitude and asked with a cold expression, you want to hold me back, you okay? Enough. If you use the abilities of other military units, I am not your opponent, but when it comes to psychic troops, I am your senior. Buzz. It can be seen that Camus is very confident in his own abilities. After saying these harsh words, he immediately released a strong mental shockwave without waiting for Wang Ling to prepare. Under the influence of the shockwave, there was a sudden burst of flying sand and rocks around the hilltop. All the trees in this area shook violently and made a roaring sound, as if they had been exposed to a strong storm in an instant. The mental shockwave mainly attacks people's mental level, but because the mental energy is too strong, the normal human brain cannot bear it, and the direct result is death by body explosion. Correspondingly, the physical damage of this shockwave is very limited, and it is difficult to cause aggression to surrounding objects. But now Camus' mental shockwave has caused such a scene of flying sand and rocks. It shows that his mental power is strong. No wonder he has the confidence to challenge Wang Ling. However, when Wang Ling, his main target, came into contact with this mental shockwave, he remained motionless, without even blinking his eyes. His face remained calm and he was breathless. If his hair hadn't been shaking with it, it makes people doubt whether the shockwave really affected him. After the shockwave ended, Camus suddenly felt a little unsure when he saw Wang Ling's condition. He frowned and did not dare to say anything big for a while. However, Wang Ling spoke again, and in an extremely angry tone, are you joking? It hasn't started yet, or is it already over? Camus was at a loss for words. After holding it for a while, he gritted his teeth and forced himself to cheer up, I'm looking down on you. But Wang Ling, don't be complacent. I can't kill you, and there's nothing you can do about it. As long as the stalemate continues with you, when others come, you will die too. Stalemate? Haha, are you worthy? Hearing this word, Wang Ling suddenly felt as if he had heard a joke. At your level, how can you have the confidence to challenge me? The old man hanged himself, have you had enough? Let me do it. Let me teach you how to use mental shock waves. Buzz. After speaking, Wang Ling immediately released an extremely powerful mental shockwave, and through powerful and exquisite mental control, he rushed towards Camus in an arc shape, blasting Camus' body almost instantly. The body then continued to move unabated, and continued to rush to a very far place, until it reached the limit distance that Wang Ling could release at present, and then it ended. The whole process was very clever in avoiding all sand, stone, and earthworks. However, when the mental shockwave ended, the excess mental power that could not be controlled because it was used for the first time also spread out, forming a rapid shockwave, blowing up a large amount of earth and rocks, and filling a large area. Mountain forest area. There was naturally a small amount of infantry in this area, but they were knocked off guard. After standing up in disgrace, they glared at the source of the mental impact with fear. One of the wild beasts was so angry that he gritted his teeth and wanted to rush over to fight Wang Ling, but was temporarily stopped by a psychic trooper. Calm down. Wang Ling is a monster, he can't fight alone. Quickly join up with the others and attack together to kill him. Humph, let this little dwarf live a little longer. The number has decreased by 1. It seems that the idiot Camus is dead. This idiot really thinks he can hold back that monster Wang Ling. It would be strange if he doesn't die. Ignore him, find someone else quickly. Not only the affected area, other participants also observed the reduced number of people from the electronic map, which immediately caused a small-scale commotion. However, no one sympathized with Camus. Most people just laughed at him and continued busy with their own affairs. The rule of the exercise is that among the 51 people, only one person can come out alive and be the final winner. In other words, not only Wang Ling, but also other infantrymen are hostile units to each other, and sooner or later they will kill each other. However, Wang Ling's threat is too great. As long as he doesn't die, no one else will survive. Therefore, after this group of people confirmed the list yesterday, they discussed it in private and decided to kill Wang Ling first, and then the remaining people would fight each other. Although Wang Ling was prohibited from fighting in other arms, even so, after witnessing Wang Ling's spiritual power yesterday, except for a bastard like Camus, no one dared to challenge Wang Ling alone, so from the exercise from the beginning, this group of people were hugging together, gathering their strength together, and then heading towards the center together. But after all, the location of other people cannot be seen on the electronic map, and they can only be gathered through this artificial face-to-face exploration method. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 833. Haha, unexpectedly, Wang Ling can also control the direction of the shock wave. In the palace of the Ruishan branch, the Yuri clone could view everything during the exercise through electronic video. Of course, he could also see clearly the process of Wang Ling killing Camus. However, he didn't feel any regret at Camus' death, but only expressed admiration for Wang Ling. Even after laughing, the Yuri clone asked the generals, "Do you think Wang Ling can survive alone when faced with the encirclement and killing of dozens of other people?" This question put the generals in a difficult position. After peeping at each other for a while, a general answered as a representative, "Chief, it's hard to say. If Wang Ling can only use the combat method of psychic troops, the combat effectiveness has been greatly reduced, and the situation is very dangerous. However, judging from the ability he just used to use shock waves, it is obvious that his mental power is strong enough to fight on a large scale. Compared with the cooperation of dozens of other people, I think the outcome should be 50-50. 55? I don't think so. Just wait and see what happens. Huh. How can you be so vulnerable to hold me back? And do I need you to hold me back? I'm here waiting for you." After killing Camus with one blow, Wang Ling also cursed a few times. But after scolding him, he was lying alone on the top of the mountain very leisurely, with his legs crossed, without the tense atmosphere of this life and death exercise at all. How could Wang Ling not know what the other participating infantrymen thought? Of course, knowing is one thing, and whether you are willing to pay attention to them is another. Wang Ling is too lazy to search for and defeat them one by one. He just stays here and lets the group of people find them together, and then they will all be solved. Of course, the other participating infantrymen had already guessed Wang Ling's mentality in advance. With Wang Ling's arrogance, he probably wouldn't be able to intercept and kill him halfway, so they didn't worry much about safety during the group gathering. Question. However, because each other did not know their specific locations, the journey for these people to gather together was inevitably a bit time-consuming and the process was somewhat boring. As a result, the Yuri clone couldn't stand it any longer and became a little impatient. he directly issued an order to shrink the safe zone in advance and forcibly accelerated the process of the exercise. After receiving the order, the 40 wild beasts and 20 virus snipers immediately moved slowly towards the center of the exercise area. As the circle of troops advanced, the safety area was gradually shrinking. The infantrymen who had gathered together did not expect that the Yuri clone would do such a trick, but they were really tricked. On the way to shrink the safe zone, there were still about 10 infantrymen still staying in the area that was about to be reduced. As a result, he was caught by a virus sniper and killed directly from a distance. The wild orcs were more resistant to beatings and could not be killed with one shot. However, the wild orcs who were opening the way in front of them started to flank and kill the target with 2 additional punches. The reduction of the safe zone made the 40 wild orcs and 20 virus snipers look like bulldozers. All infantry participating in the exercise they encountered during their advance were their targets. As a result, this reduction during the sweep, 8 participating infantrymen were killed. There were also a few infantrymen with higher lives who sensed something was wrong in advance. They temporarily gave up the mission goal of forming a group and hurriedly fled into the safe zone, thus surviving. Damn it, why did the safe zone shrink in advance? 8 people died at once, 8 parts of power. Did we take too long and ignore the safety time? It shouldn't be. I bribed an officer and asked about the safety time for each round. Logically speaking, it hasn't arrived yet. But isn't this time set by the leader? Since he is the leader, he may change the time midway if he sees that we are wasting too much time. It's possible. Damn, speed up the pace and gather the remaining people as soon as possible. We can't delay it any longer. After escaping this first round of reduction, the surviving infantrymen could not help but feel a little frightened. They gathered together and discussed the matter in a hurry. The temporary change of time by the Yuri clone really caught them off guard, and they had no choice but to speed up the pace. Ha 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 ha. Yes, that's it. How can there be no tension in a life and death exercise? As a theater goer, Yuri's clone smiled very proudly when he saw this situation. This exercise was nominally to test Wang Ling, but in fact, it was just to add some fun to the Yuri clone. The other generals also watched with cold eyes and did not comment. This kind of cruel exercise is very rare even within the Mind Empire. It stands to reason that all the senior figures in the Russian branch should be present if this happens, but Yuri X is not there. Watching the electronic during the drill in the video, no one paid attention to him for a while. In fact, Yuri Lord X. The scientific researchers in the combat laboratory saluted quickly when they saw Yuri X. Yuri. A scientific researcher replied with a little pride, "Yes, Master, the level of transformation is too risky and almost no one can bear it, so we have added a violent inhibitor to it. With Wang Ling's physical fitness and mental strength, the probability of success will reach more than 95%. 95%? It's quite high. Let me check it first, and you can go about your business." Yes. After casually perfunctory, Yuri X grabbed one of the reagents, checked it properly, and then another one. He checked like this for a long time, until the scientific researchers were slightly distracted and their attention was no longer on him. Yuri X suddenly turned his back to the camera, seemingly checking the reagents, but in fact, taking advantage of this brief during that time, he had secretly replaced the rage inhibitor with an ordinary solution. Humph. Experimental transformation mainly relies on violent inhibitors to increase the success rate. Without this thing, the probability of experiment failure would probably exceed 90%. Wang Ling, don't blame me for being cruel, blame me, just blame yourself. You were rude to me, and I endured it. You were appreciated by the leader and covered up my shine, and I endured it. But if you want to take my place and become a heroic unit of the Soul Empire, then I can only ask you to die. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 834. At the beginning, Yuri's clone proposed to use Wangling as the strongest hero-level unit after it was successfully transformed and strengthened, and even threatened that Yuri X might take his place. From that time on, Yuri X had already held a grudge against Wangling. In the past, no matter how Wangling offended him, However, the Beast King's enhanced transformation reagents are unique and unprecedented within the Empire of the Mind. Everything is still in the experimental stage. Although the data shows that the success rate can reach 95%, after all, there is still 5% failure. The rate is uncontrollable, it's really unlucky, and the experiment failed, so there's nothing we can do about it, right? Moreover, Yuri in this way, even if it fails, no one will suspect the potion. This method is almost invisible. Humph, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. After doing this, After bidding farewell to the scientific researchers, Yuri X left the combat laboratory and returned to the main hall very casually. In this hall, Yuri's clone and several other generals were still watching the electronic video. They had no idea what Yuri X had done during this period. Ha, why didn't you assemble for so long? Is the work efficiency so poor? On the hilltop in the center of the training forest, Wangling lay down and rested for a long time. There was no movement at all, and he yawned out of boredom. He was bored, but the other surviving infantrymen were very busy now. The area of this mountain forest is really not small, and there are trees blocking the view. There are no signs on the electronic map, so it is quite troublesome to find each other. However, after all, the Yuri clones were impatient and narrowed the safe zone in advance, so the group had to speed up and gather together. During this period, the Yuri clone felt that it was not enjoyable enough and urged to shrink the safe zone in advance. During the process of shrinking, 7 more infantrymen were shot and killed. Except for Wangling, there were only 35 infantrymen participating in the exercise. People. The number of people was small, and the combat effectiveness was reduced, but after all, the scope was also smaller, and there were fewer targets to look for. Finally, before narrowing the safety zone for the 4th time, they were successfully assembled. A group of 35 people quickly rushed to the center of the mountain forest. The area of the mountain forest is not small, but if you go in one direction, the distance is not too long. Not long after the group of people hurried on, they finally bumped into Wangling, who was lying lazily on the hill. Hearing the clatter of footsteps, Wangling finally cheered up, sat up cross-legged, yawned, and said mockingly, "You really cherish your life, it took you so long to come to die. Damn it, you're still so arrogant when disaster is imminent." He is so arrogant that he can't even see the situation clearly. The infantry were angry, but the violent orc among them couldn't stand this cowardice. He pointed at Wangling's nose and cursed, "Little dwarf, you won't be able to hold on for much longer. You're done, little dwarf. If you could use a gun, we would still worry about you, but now you can't. Haha. Why are you talking so much nonsense to this dwarf? Let's go together and tear him apart. Kill." This group of infantrymen could participate in this life and death exercise. They really couldn't stand Wangling for a long time. They only gave Wangling time to say a word and then launched the charge. A group of wild orcs led the way, eager to tear Wangling to pieces, followed by a team of Yuri's recruits, firing from a distance, and at the end were the psychic troops. If all the wild orcs and Yuri's recruits failed, they would release shockwaves together, forcing them to kill Wangling. Tisk, tisk, am I really that annoying? But Wangling was dumbfounded. He sat cross-legged on the hill, motionless. However, his eyes became colder and colder. "I have to say, you are really a bunch of fools. If you want to hate me, you have to do it. You can only continue to hate me if you live, right? Do you think that since I can't use a gun, you can kill me with your lineup? What a joke. Buzz. After the words fell, Wang Ling's eyes suddenly condensed, and an extremely powerful mental shockwave spread out violently. Unlike last time, this time Wang Ling did not deliberately control the shockwave. As a result, the shockwave centered on him and spread in all directions, destroying everything around him indiscriminately. Boom! In an instant, it was as if a strong storm had blown up in this area, flying sand and rocks, the earth cracking, strong shock waves driving the flying dust, spreading away, and even knocking down large trees in patches. As the name suggests, the main function of mental shockwave is mental attack, but this mental attack has caused such a degree of damage to the surrounding environment, let alone the human body. The 35 charging infantrymen of various types almost exploded without even letting out a scream the moment they came into contact with the shock wave. After detonating this group of target infantry, the shock wave still had no tendency to stop. Instead, it took advantage of the situation and spread over a large area around it, destroying a large area of woods before gradually stopping. After the flying dust gradually fell, this area was already devastated. Almost half of the trees in the base area had collapsed, and shallow cracks like spider webs were cracked on the ground, spreading far away. From extreme movement to extreme stillness, there seems to be something strange about this whole scene. With the explosion of the 35 infantrymen, the exercise finally officially ended, and as the winner, Wang Ling was still sitting on the hill with a ferocious face. If you look closely, you will see that his pupils are covered with bloodshot eyes. He clenches his steel teeth, pinches his scalp with one hand, and screams from time to time, as if he is in great pain. After a long time like this, when the pain subsided slightly, Wang Ling gradually put down his hand, panting heavily, and said to himself, "Is this the limit of my mental power? It's so uncomfortable. The shock wave released with all my strength, although the power is terrifying, the consumption is too great. After it is released, I will lose my combat effectiveness for a long time, and I can't do this anymore."